Welcome to The Last Talk Show. Tonight, we'll be talking to Paul Scheer about Have a Good Trip, Adventures in Psychedelics.
All the way from the island of Nantucket, Massachusetts, it's The Last Talk Show! The Last Talk Show!
Welcome, Paul, first of all.
Well, I'm excited to be here, but really be here in my house because I have not left in about 180 days so far. So I feel like I've actually done more work out in the world, but never have left my house. I feel like I'm available to go meet up with people, have Zooms. It's been wonderful. I mean, look, I'm in Nantucket right now. Didn't even get on a plane. Perfect.
Hey, can I ask you, have you ever been to Nantucket?
I have never been to Nantucket. I'm an East Coast person. And for me, the Hamptons were the place to go. And I was going to the Hamptons before the Hamptons were cool, before there were reality shows about it. My grandma had a house in Sag Harbor, and there was nothing to do there. There was a 7-Eleven, and that was about it. So I feel like I can have ownership in the Hamptons because I don't know the Hamptons with like white wine spritzers. I know it like, oh, we hear Jimmy Buffett lives down the block. Like that was the height of the Hamptons.
Yes.
Jimmy Buffett might live down the block and he has a seaplane.
I think Jimmy Buffett flies back and forth from the Hamptons to Nantucket because there's a seaplane that's going in and out this summer that everyone's like, there goes Buffett. He's off for another adventure. He's like the international man of mystery. He's often...
Well, let's talk about him for 1 second. I know we have much bigger things to talk about, but
Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett also played an international man of mystery on Hawaii Five-0. He was a man who owned a seaplane. He was like a former Vietnam vet, and more of that. I wanted a spin-off of Jimmy Buffett flying a seaplane, just solving mysteries.
dropping in places with his guitar. He does a set. He solves a crime. He flies out of there. It's a good way to get into movies, but you started a project called Unspooled, which
Yes.
first season you watched all AFI's movies.
I realized that basically there's a giant gap in my film knowledge. I love movies, but I probably have watched more like Vin Diesel movies than James Dean movies. And, you know, I'm a person who's seen, I've seen every, Jean-Claude Van Damme, but never have I like watched Citizen Kane. So it was a way to kind of teach myself about film and kind of understand like these great films. And it's been an amazing experience. So we did a whole season. We watched 100 of the films on the AFI list, talked to great people like Spike Lee came on, talk about Do the Right Thing. And, we had Peter Bogdanovich on. We've had all these great people on. And now this new season, we're kind of creating a better list because the AFI list, there's no female directors on it. There's only one Black director on it. The films are very much picked by like a generation of men who made films in the 70s, or that's how it feels. So we're going through right now and we're just watching a whole bunch of fun stuff. So we have had Amy Heckerling on to talk about Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is amazing. She is the coolest lady of all time. She's been around and she's like part of that cool part of Hollywood that I think is like these weirdos that we don't necessarily have anymore. Like, and I mean that in the most loving way. And she has a connection that you and I both have, which is Stuart Kornfeld, who was at Red Hour and one of the people involved, I think, in the beginning of this documentary. There's people who've been around and love the weird art world as much as they love making film, right? Like they wanted to just embrace something a little bit different. They weren't in the system, even though they were making films in the system. And Amy Heckerling, I think that's why her movies are so good. I mean, Clueless holds up. It's so good. And Fast Times is great.
The reason Fast Times is so interesting, it came out of an era where we're making 80s almost skin film, like Porky's and stuff, where we're making money. And suddenly they were like, let's have a female director who's a little bit of a weirdo make one of these movies and see what happens. And instead there's a nuanced, beautiful story full of actual humans dealing with growing up.
What she was telling us when we were interviewing her is like the studio originally wanted it to be a Porky's-like film. And so when she first read the script, she's like, I don't know. But then she read the book, Cameron's book, and she talked to, Cameron Crowe, and she's like, I want to put more of your book in this script. And he's like, I want that too. So they sat and they took all these elements from the book, which was, the book isn't Porky's. The book is like a real insight into these people. So that's why the movie got to be so good. And I think because of her want to create something actually that had some substance, we got that movie, which is, I think, it's really awesome.
I just read something recently about the making of Valley Girl, and which was also a female director. When she got the movie, they were like, well, you have to have X amount of boobs in it. That was part of the contract. And so she was like, well, I don't care about that, but what I'll do is I'll have a locker room scene where I have a shot of two people up close, and then there's like some people just walk by in the background, and then check, boobs done.
Right. Well, I mean, you had like, there is a weird thing, and I guess now because there's such a lack of boobs in film, like gratuitous boobs, like, and that's like, I think growing up, it was like, oh wow, like, you know, just one of the guys, or these moments where you're like, boobs, like it didn't even feel sexualized. It was just like, here are boobs. It's so funny now to be like, oh wow, that was a trend that studio people were trying to put in. And Amy was talking about that on our podcast and saying like, oh yeah, she tried to put in some dick in there too. And the studio's like, no, that is offensive. Boobs are not offensive. So that was like even at its flaccid, you know, not a sexual way, just showing a naked dick. Like, no. We can't.
No. No one wants that.
No. I mean, I also agree that no one probably wants that.
No one wants men and women. No one wants that.
No one wants that.
Let me just randomly have, as you've been studying films, is there anything that you've come across that you're like, oh, that would be great in a drive-in? Or has there any great drive-in memories from your youth or recently?
Yeah, my first drive-in was a double feature of, this is the best double feature, and I think it defines me ultimately, Star Wars and The Jerk. And I remember that my parents took me to Star Wars, and then they put me to sleep for The Jerk. But I was trying not to sleep, so I remember really like peering out under my blanket to, watch The Jerk. And I didn't understand it, but I love Steve Martin, or I think I love Steve Martin. Anyway, it basically cemented my love for these two things. And by the way, program that. Star Wars and The Jerk is a great double feature.
Before we talk about drugs, we do a segment called Tips for Kids, because it's brought to us by Musack, which supports kids' music programs.
Yes, we love that.
Come on, guys, help the kids out. Go to musack.org. No, that's the way you spell it.
Do you have any tips for kids?
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I've been thinking a lot about this, actually. And the two things that have been like a rallying cry here in our house as we've been here for like 180 days is to talk about your emotions, even if you don't understand what these emotions are. Like, find an ally, whether it's me or your mom. And it's been really interesting because the kids have been so cooped up that they're angry sometimes, or they're sad. And there's no real reason why they're angry and sad. But it's because they've been living in the house and they don't know what's going on. So I really found that getting them to admit their feelings and talk about their feelings, I know it sounds very like touchy-feely, whatever, but is really been like wonderful and super helpful. It's something that like, I think when I was a kid, my parents would be like, oh, just think happy thoughts, or don't worry about it, it'll get better. And it's like, no, you can be angry. You can be upset. Like, I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm trapped here, So, so I think that that's been a real big thing. And the other thing that we really try to do is get them to use their imagination. One of my kids is 4 years old, and he's created a whole fantasy world, and it's hilarious. And my other son gets so angry at it. He's like, they're lies. Those are lies. He's not telling you the truth. And I keep on trying to explain to him, I'm like, there's a difference between lying and using your imagination. So, and trying to draw that distinction, like, don't think that you can't use your imagination because you're lying. Like, it's like trying to make sure that I impart that wisdom now that he doesn't feel afraid to create because it's a lie.
I had something that was like a switch for us, was like, our kids get frustrated. It's normal for it to be locked in with your parents for so long and not see your friends, to be frustrated. We found like one bit of advice, I think online or in a book, but our kids will be like, Dad, you suck. You're not funny. You're just lame. And like, I don't like any of your movies or whatever,
Right, yeah.
And I found this bit of advice was like, what they're doing is saying how they feel, not really caring about you at all.
Right.
And it was, even if that's not true, it was a tremendous relief that I don't always suck.
No, well, look, you are basically their only outlet, right? Like they can't get on their own Zooms, they can't get mad at work, they can't get mad at, they can get mad at school, whatever they can do. But yeah, you're going to take the brunt of everything. So it is good to make it not personal sometimes.
Yeah. All right, let's talk psychedelics and have a good trip. First of all, some people, you know, are like everyone should do acid, everyone should take psychedelics. Are you an advocate for psychedelics? Where are you on the psychedelic spectrum?
I'm an advocate for people to do what they want to do. I feel like if you're going to force someone into doing a psychedelic, it is not going to be a good time. Like you need, and that's, to me, what I love about the documentary was the commonality across the board, right? Everyone had similar stories. And if you watch it and you've done it, you can relate to pretty much everything in it on some level, right? Because it's all a part of this big giant trip. It's a shared experience. And in many respects, it's a moment where we are all in the same world. And maybe we experience things differently, but the perception is all skewed the same way, I think. But I feel like the most important part of it, and I don't know how much it's really touched on in the doc, but is finding the right group of people to do it with, right? Because the trip itself that's a whole thing, but you have to go on that trip with the right people, like, you know, and everyone's got to be in the right mindset. And I've been in those situations where one person doesn't want to do it, or, you know, and then that person has a bad trip, that person, you know, brings down the group, and that energy then brings down the trip. So you have to, you really have to cultivate it. And I think Bourdain talks about that a little bit too, like really preparing for it, really understanding what you want to do.
There's a story in the movie that is actually not your story that you share in the movie. And I didn't even put it together that it was your bachelor party, but Nick Cole tells the story. A kelp monster comes out of it and stuff. And then later I was like, oh, that's Paul's bachelor party. We didn't even think that.
Yeah.
What did you think of that? That seems like an example where you found a group of friends that this was like, okay, we're kind of on a mission together. This is gonna be okay.
Yeah, well, that's totally true. It's like everyone came with the idea of like, what we're gonna do is Saturday morning, we're gonna wake up and we're gonna go to the beach. We're gonna, you know, take mushrooms, and they're gonna be good mushrooms. We know where we got them from, and we're just gonna have a mellow, chill day. And the beach was right across the street from this house that we rented, and it was exactly that. It was like we were completely isolated, which I think is such a big part of it. Like when I listened to Carrie Fisher in the doc, like talk about, you know, being topless at this beach, and then all of a sudden the tourists coming, like that's the worst fear, right? I don't like to see and interact with people when I am high like that. I want to be in my own private island, and I can be, you know, because I think I'll get self-conscious. And if I get self-conscious, then I'll start to not enjoy it that much, you know. Or you go to a place like a Bonnaroo where you're lost in a sea of people and it doesn't make a difference, right? But here it was like we're all on that beach. It was so fun, and everyone's kind of going through their own thing. But that idea of just we all wanted to be there. We all wanted to be doing it, you know, because what would be the worst is one person like, nah, I'm not doing it. And as a matter of fact, one person who didn't want to do it left before he did it. And then another person who didn't want to do it came after we did it. And it was great because they didn't have to feel like, oh, I can't, like, because that's the other thing too. Like, I don't need to be beholden to you. Like, oh, I'm not giving you what you want from me because I'm high. Like, that's another weird thing that people want. Like, oh, you guys are so hard to talk to. Yeah, no shit. We're high.
Right. And that's the worst thing. Then trying to be good to talk to when you can't be.
I don't need any of that pressure. I mean, for me, I need to take every bit of anxiety out of the equation.
It is a very personal thing. I think one thing is finding like-minded friends. Another is just like knowing your brain and what you need, what makes you anxious, what makes you comfortable, what, you know, drugs aren't right for everybody. They're good for some people. They're not good for others. And I think that was one of the things we tried to do in the movie was give a lot of different takes on it so that people go like, oh, I'm more of a Sting, or I'm more of a Paul.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think what I really liked about it too was you could talk about something as simple as like never drive when you're high, right? But then someone else going like Andy Richter, I think, is like, I want to drive when I'm high, you know? So it is very specific. I think, yeah, you have to understand how you're coming at it. And the only thing I would say is if you've had a bad experience if I always feel like you should do it more than once, because how can you change the variables to make it better for yourself, right? I remember talking to a lot of people, and this is much lower on the schedule, but it's like, but people who smoke pot for the first time, like, oh, I didn't like it. I just felt this or that and this. And it's like, oh, well, maybe these things needed to be changed. Maybe you didn't need to do it in a high school party where you felt like you were an outcast. Like, you know, you have to like kind of find your moment. So I always advocate, if you've done it once and it was bad, try it again and see if you can tweak the variables and also the dosage and all that sort of stuff. Because I think the other part of it too is, Sarah Silverman was talking about it in the doc, like, I don't feel anything, right? This is the thing that we need to let everybody know, and everybody does know it if you've done it, is like, when you say to yourself, I don't feel anything, don't take more. That's the moment where you have to be like, and then it didn't work. Like, you have to be okay with it not working, right? Because it's moments before it's going to start working. And I feel like the people I've been with who have really had bad trips have been like, it's not working, clunk, clunk, clunk. And then you're like, oh, well, now you're done. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Have you seen any moments in cinema psychedelia or like great trips that you love?
You nailed it in the doc. You know, Steve Agee talking about how it's never quite right. To me, like, we can always agree that Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing, the Terry Gilliam film, is probably the closest to it, because I think he's such a visual artist, and I think he did such beautiful things, and it made Hunter S. Thompson wrote about it so well that he was able to capture that so well visually. But I would say the one that got me, that I loved, I think it was 40-Year-Old Virgin, or like one of the Paul Rudd, Judd Apatow movies where they go see Beatles in Vegas, right? And they're just like, whoa. And you're not watching them be high. You're just watching them enjoy it. And then they're just like kind of pacing around their hotel room, like moving chairs around. And that, to me, like, nailed being high. Like, we're doing this dumb thing, but it seems so important in the moment. Like, we got to move these chairs. These chairs need to be like this. Oh, yes, the chairs are the thing. Like, when you focus on something dumb like that. And I feel like that, you know, it's so bizarre, because we're in an industry of people that I would say primarily are down with being high, right? Or experimenting. But yet it's often the most missed concept in film. I thought Insecure did an amazing job. Insecure did a show where they go to Coachella and they get high there. And it was really fun. And they kind of embraced like some of the sexuality of getting high too when you're with somebody you like. So I thought that was like really cool.
This movie, crazily, took 11 years to make. So
I literally shot it, I think, in the first round of shooting. Like, when I looked at myself there, I was like, holy shit, I'm young. I'm like 29 years old.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you even remember like sitting down for an interview? Because you were one of the first 7 people we talked to.
I vaguely remember it. I remember getting the receipts, because it was sort of like I was talking to you about something, and I had gotten high in Amsterdam, and I kept a journal while I was high because I thought I was going to be like a Hunter S. Thompson, and I had it, and I was like, I got to show you my journal, my insane journal. And I remember that experience of talking about it, but then I really had forgotten it for a long time. I'm not happy with the outfit that I chose to wear in that doc, but what I really remember is the recreation section with Rob Corddry, because that was shot about 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah, so like 3 or 4 years later, we called you back and we're like, we're still making this movie and we need you again. And not only do we need you again, but Rob is now. So the way that happened was, we had your story. You told a wonderful, right. I mean, we talked for an hour and a half or something. So your story was epic, but we made a nice piece out of it.
Yeah. And
then we're like, oh, we think Rob Corddry would be great to reenact this. We brought him in and reenacted it. And then he told a story and we were like, I think we got to get Paul to reenact this because it's the only thing that makes sense. And then, of course, it had some nudity in it. How much was that like, oh, Jesus, well, I guess I got to do this, or was it fun?
You know, I am one of those people that my body, I don't use my naked body as a comedy punchline that much, just because I'm embarrassed by it. But, you know, for you guys, I'll do it. I mean, it's especially in that time in my life. I'm in better shape now. I feel better about my body now. But in that time, it's always kind of thrown at you, like, take off your shirt, and you forget, like, it's a hard thing. Like, you're like, I could do it in front of a couple people, but then this is going to be locked in forever. And it's fine. It's fine. But it is always that weird moment of like, okay, here we go.
No, in retrospect, I was like, oh, was that like an Irene Cara and Fame moment that we were just like kind of casually throwing out to Paul, like, yeah, just take off your shirt and start goofing around. This will be great.
No, I mean, look, my mom is the most mortified of anything they've ever done. Human Giant sketch that I did, and Human Giant was a sketch show I did with Rob Hubel and Aziz Ansari. The bit was that I was a missing college student, and it was a news report like, this college student has been missing, and if you know anything about him, please let us know. But the only footage they had of me was on a video camera from a party where I was totally naked, air humping on my bed. So like I'm blurred out at the crotch, just air humping, like, yeah, like just the most fratty, jockish bullshit. And it was, my mom was like, I've never been more disappointed in you. And there I am, just like, yeah. So that really, I can't top that.
When you watched the movie, were there any parts of it, anything that jumped out to you that you either loved or hated, or any notes as a student of film?
No, you know what I really loved about it was, it's so hard to thread the line between like teaching, being funny, and also having something that's incredibly relatable. And I think this documentary does an amazing job at doing all of that. Like, you get to see a little bit of the history of LSD, I think, and psychedelics, and you see the future of it. And I also think what I love about the doc was it felt like I was sitting around with a group of people and talking about our experiences, because that is the energy. Like I said about How Did This Get Made? It's a bunch of people sitting around talking about a movie at a diner. This is a bunch of people sitting around at a diner talking about their highs when they got high. And I've had multiple conversations like that. And these stories that everyone's telling, they've done that too. Like, these are routines for the most part. I mean, Sting, I don't know, but for the rest of people, like, everyone has told the story because inevitably you were in that moment. Have you shit your pants? I want to hear your story. Have you done mushrooms? I want to hear your story. Like, have you ever, like, it's these like commonalities that we're embarrassed by, but then when we share them, we all connect on this level. And I think, for me, it was bittersweet in a way, because to see like people like Anthony Bourdain and Carrie Fisher, and, I love the two of them, and it was nice to kind of see them, you got their last released works, for the most part. And it was nice to kind of visit with them again. I thought that was really cool. And I just think, it's a doc where you just keep on going like, oh wait, they're in it, because you got people at certain points, like, you have all the Workaholics guys together doing a recreation, and you probably couldn't do that right now. Yeah. Because everyone's in different spots, but right then you got it. Like, so you did get people at interesting points, and so I think it was really, I love it. I just love seeing it's like Cannonball Run for psychedelic docs.
That was really the intention, was like, what if we had a big dinner party and everyone shared their story? Was like, if there's a way to make it feel that intimate. And we debated a lot, Cary and Anthony, and we're really like, they're both idols of mine. I was thrilled to get to talk to them. And we really were like, is it somehow irresponsible to share these stories now or something? But we really came down with, they got great wisdom from their experiences with psychedelics. They shared these out of love.
It's only exploitative if you did it posthumously without their involvement, right? Like, they wanted to be involved. They sat down for the interview to tell this story. Like, I mean, to me, that's the best part of it. It's like, their life, their stories, their work lives on because they agreed to do these certain things that we all get to share. And so, like, that's what it is it was a great visitation with them about something that I feel like, Carrie Fisher and Bourdain both talk about it differently. So to hear it like this in a little bit more of a, I don't know, it's candid, but it's a little bit lighter. It was really great.
So there's one thing that didn't make the movie, and I'm going to, where we had Rob came in to reenact your story. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, oh my God, this would be so meta amazing if he, as Paul, reenacted his day on set playing Rob. So we did a quick behind the scenes thing where he drove up in his car, and then I went to makeup and I got dressed up as Paul, but then I was Rob. It was like these layers of stuff. It's very silly. My producing partner, Mike Rosenstein, who you know, would not allow it in the movie. He's like, this is the dumbest thing ever. We will not be putting this in the movie. So I want to try a new segment on this, The Last Talk Show, called The Hot Seat, where we put Mike Rosenstein in the hot seat and just ask him, why wouldn't you allow this in the movie? Mike?
Hi, Donick.
Hey!
What's happening?
Mike,
Okay.
I'm thrilled to have you on The Last Talk Show. You're part of a new segment we're doing called The Last Talk Show Hot Seat. And in this segment, we're putting you in the hot seat because we want to ask you, why were you so adamantly opposed to having the Paul as Rob as Paul video in the film?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here in Nantucket. Love Nantucket. Well, I didn't know about this. So I'm being ambushed, first of all. Well, I love Paul Scheer. I mean, anything he does is funny. So I would say cut for time.
Fair. And I know you do.
Surgery is amazing. I mean, look, I could watch a movie of them playing each other for a whole movie.
Yeah, no, and we had this great other segment of them. So let's watch you dug up an early cut of our credits with a little bit of that on there. Let's watch that now and see how it holds up. And now, The Last Talk Show world premiere of Paul Plays Rob, pretending Rob's Dave playing Paul, behind the scenes of Rob Plays Paul shoot. Winner, most confusing premise award.
I had a great time making, this movie called Bad Trip. Found a parking space, which was cool.
Right in front of the place, too.
I got made up to look like Paul Scheer. We shot it, and I wore a backpack.
Yeah.
And then I left. Yeah.
Seeing it again, I mean, what do you think now? Are you laughing out loud?
I'm laughing out loud now, only because it was the thing that we argued maybe the most about randomly, because it just had no point in the movie, but it is very funny, so I give you that.
All right, I have to confess something. So I'm having an interview with Paul, and I try to explain that we cut this thing from the movie, but in my memory, we shot this like 5 years ago. In my memory, Rob Corddry played Paul, and then and so I was describing to Paul, like, we did this thing where Rob played you behind the scenes in real life, and and Paul was like, uh-huh. And I was like, Mike wouldn't let me have it. I'm going to put him in the hot seat. And Paul was like, uh-huh. I just watched the video. It's actually Paul playing Rob. So he must have been like, what are you talking about?
Most people who shot the movie had no recollection of shooting the movie. We shot it over the course of so many years. So if you remember, several people were like, what is this? We were in this? Like Bill Kreutzmann from The Grateful Dead. Totally. But once we reminded him, he was very excited about it.
Yeah, that was a funny part of this process, is very late in the game having to get a few releases of people who had shot a segment 7 years ago and going like, what movie? What am I doing? Anyway, I'm glad to have a place where we can show that clip, and, pretty trippy, huh?
Please hang up and try again.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear all the honking horns for that piece. I'm glad it finally saw the light of day.
I mean, look, I appreciate what you were trying to do there. I think that that feels like a high idea. Like, I think that may have just, I don't know. The doc could afford it. Look, you have a squirrel yelling at Princess Leia. It could have worked. I think that Mike might have been right, that it might have been like a hat on a hat on a hat. But I'm more than happy to continue to go down this path as a Rob Corddry impersonator, and Rob goes down the path as a Paul Scheer impersonator. We can kind of keep on keeping on doing it.
So in the reenactment, the kelp monster reenactment, watching that, did you feel like there was anything from your bachelor party that we missed, or did we get enough of the meat of that?
Oh no, you totally got it. I think that was probably the highlight of the day. I mean, like I said, we were just hanging out, having fun, and that became like not the rallying cry, but that became like this moment. Like, it was such an iconic moment. He became this kelp monster, covering him in kelp. And I have pictures on my iPhone, of just my friends pulling up these sheets of seaweed, and covering him, and he loving it. And then what I remember, and I think this is not necessarily in the doc, if I'm remembering correctly, on Monday we had to go back to work on the league, and Nick and I were sitting in makeup chairs next to each other, and he was just covered in bumps and bites and looked like he had been through the ringer. And Nick, has like some skin sensitivity anyway, so it was like he like basically sandpapered his skin, and it was like it came back to bite him. Like, yeah, so kelp, not great for your skin. A lot of little bugs in there. A lot of little bugs.
Good tip for the kids or whoever. I'm going to put Mike back in the hot seat. He did make me cast some hunky male models to play himself.
Yes.
Welcome back to The Last Talk Show. You're back in the hot seat for another issue. We were talking about casting, and we have this one trip, Nick Kroll's trip, where we cast actors to play Nick and Paul and you, because you were there on the day, and you got to cast yourself. Why did you choose the actor you chose?
It's funny, I didn't choose those actors, actually. That was our line producer, Jeremy Wrights, who's also the producer of Pen 15, new season out on Hulu. I'll give him a little plug. And I don't even know where he found those people, but he thought that it would be really funny to cast Rob and Paul and Mike as like hunky guys, like really hunky guys, meaning like we're not fit and hunky, I guess is his joke. So yeah.
It was funny. It was funny. Okay, thanks for answering that. And that's the end of the hot seat segments. I did want to just I guess tell you officially on this show, making this movie was one of the funnest experiences of my life. It went on for 11 years and has very much become a part of my daily routine. And it's weird not having it something that we're constantly in production on. But you are a huge part of that, obviously, and it wouldn't be the movie it is without you. So thank you for everything you did.
Thank you for taking me on the journey. It's part of my everyday life too. This is my actual kitchen.
Well, we've got you. Any behind the scenes moments or stories from the shoot you'd want to share?
Did you talk about going to Carrie Fisher's house? Because that was one of the peaks of my entire life.
No, we haven't talked about that.
We went to her house. She invited us in for hours. She told us we could walk around her house and just like shoot B-roll everywhere, which was fascinating because she had all these like Princess Leia trinkets and this crazy backyard that had a weird pool up in a hill with like, I remember she had like giant street signs and plastic cows up in the trees. And she just was like very proud of her trippy house. And she was a delight. And that was really amazing.
Yeah, that was an amazing day. That was such a weird part of the process is, part of the way we made this was we hired a casting agent. We sent out 1,000 requests to 1,000 people, and 100 came back through the system. And so randomly, any given week, we'd get an email or a phone call that would say, Ozzy Osbourne can meet you tomorrow, or Anthony Bourdain needs you in New York, or Sting will meet you in 3 months. And Cary was one of those ones that was just like, wait, Cary, you mean Princess Leia is having us over to her house? And yeah, it was very cool wandering around and talking with her. We talked for a couple hours about everything, and have a lot of footage actually that someday we'll find a place for to share because it was so intimate and interesting what she shared.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to watch an hour documentary of just like walking around her backyard, we have that too.
Yeah, if the price is right. So in the course of doing press for this thing, I did a lot of interviews, and a lot of people would ask, like, is this movie pro-drugs? Do you think everyone should do LSD? So the question for you is the movie pro-drugs?
Well, why don't we put the director in the hot seat?
That's not a bad idea. Okay. Hey, Donick, welcome to the show. Thrilled to talk to you, the director of Have a Good Trip. Thanks for having me. First of all, I just want to tell you, I love this movie. I think that the direction, the writing, the production, everything was just like top notch. You seem like a really talented, amazing director, writer, creative. This movie was groundbreaking and like nothing ever before. And, I'm a huge fan. Thank you. That's so nice. Well, yeah, we had a blast making it. I wish we could make more. We're hoping maybe for a part 2 or a series. I am going to put you in the last talk show hot seat. Does this movie promote the use of psychedelics? No, I am definitely not an advocate for everyone using psychedelics. I think everybody's brains are built differently. Everyone's situation is different. They're powerful tools and can lead to incredible insights when used in the right set and setting. One of our interviewees, Charles Grobe, a professor at UCLA, talks about using them in therapeutic settings in nature with a therapist, having an intention, having the right dosage, knowing where it came from, and knowing it's right for you. I recommend people read the books, do the research, watch the movies, inform yourself, figure out what you need, and figure out if it's right for you at all. It may not be. You know what? Actually, do you mind putting a mask on? Sure. Yeah, I'll put a mask on.
I'm Donick. I love drugs. Everyone should do them. They should be given to children and people, and everyone should do drugs. Drugs, drugs, drugs. I love drugs.
You're just dubbing stuff in over my masks. No, I'm not. Making me sound like I'm a crazy person and want everyone to take drugs. That's crazy. I'm not. Look, I thought this was going to be fun. You're literally putting words in my mouth. You said it, not me. I'm out of here. Jerk. One of the things you shared was this journal that you talked about, and you put down a lot of, big revelations while you were tripping in the journal. I remember you talking about some of them being as simple as like, Twizzlers are good.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything either silly, because tripping does have this sort of parallel thing where a lot of stuff is very silly and hard to translate back to real life, but then sometimes you take some real wisdom from a trip that informs how you go about your life. Is there anything from trips that have informed your life or your creative process or that you look back on?
Yeah, I think, all right, this is as serious as I'll get. I think what psychedelics does, at the end of the day, the base common denominator is it makes you stay present. It makes you embrace the moment, bad or good. You have to live in this moment. And I think we live in a world where you can pull out your cell phone, you can check out, you can go to another room, and this is kind of a giant foot on your back or a hand pushing you forward, and it allows you to, you have to get through it. You have to get through it, for better or for worse. And it's a good thing to remember, like, to just embrace the moments, embrace the silliness, embrace, like, you can spend 30 minutes organizing chairs. It's not a waste of time, right? Like, it, I think we are so prone to be like, if I'm not doing something productive, it's not worth it. And sometimes the most productive things are allowing yourself just to be and interact with the world. So I would say that that's, to me, why I think a lot of people do it. And when we talk about Carrie Fisher in that documentary, like why she felt so natural on it, I think it's because you can zone out the outside world and all your problems kind of go away, unless you look in a mirror. And you're allowed to just be at one with yourself. And, when I looked at my hand, I saw like an animal paw, and, we're all animals and we're just trying to get through this. So, take it day by day and don't, that's what I would say. Just be in the moment.
Is there anything you'd want to put Mike Rosenstein in the hot seat for?
Yes. Why did this documentary take 11 years, Mike? You produced this? You call that good producing? 11 years? Come on, man. Give me some answers.
All right, Mike. I have a little bit of bad news for you. You're in the hot seat for a record third time. Paul Scheer has put you in the hot seat. He has a question for you.
Okay.
11 years to make this movie. You're the producer. What took so long to produce it? Give me answers, is what he asks.
I take complete blame for it taking so long. It's my fault. Sorry, Paul Scheer. But look, everyone really liked how young they look in the movie, so that's a plus.
Huge plus. Any other highlights from shooting it? You mentioned Carrie Fisher. Any other days that you were like, this is great, I never want this to end?
Well, we went to Bonnaroo one year to shoot, and I'm not sure if any of the footage even made it in, but that was a really fun experience because we went there and had a trailer and set up interviews, and that was really fun. And obviously talking to Anthony Bourdain, who like let us shoot in his office all day. I think we also shot like Reggie Watts and Rosie Perez there. He just sort of like opened up his office to let us shoot, and that was cool. And
yeah, what was so cool about that day, what was really interesting was Anthony Bourdain came in and had a story, perfectly crafted story from beginning to end. Like he just drops these amazing stories all day as he goes throughout his day. And then Rosie Perez came in, and I didn't know what to expect with Rosie, and she dropped a perfectly story too that was perfectly crafted, beginning, middle, and end, funny, weird, crazy. So yeah, both of the same day, both of those. Just
being with everyone, that hearing their stories, and in real life when you're hearing people go on, and we talked to everyone for 30 minutes or an hour or more, it was really interesting to just sort of go into their lives, and you kind of you feel this, you see people feel this nostalgia as they're talking about these trips that kind of is very contagious. And so when you're in the room with them and as you're watching the movie, hopefully it's sort of this thing where you're it's more than just a story. It's really this like life-changing experience generally, and that comes off in the room. So all of the interviews were really, that was like a really special part of making it. I felt like doing the interviews, you would really have to get in their headspace, and as they were taking you on these journeys, that you would get sort of in a trip with them, you know, and then it'd often be like, all right, there's 10 minutes until I have to pick the kids up from carpool or whatever, and I'm like, I gotta shake this acid trip off and go back to real life. Yes, it's certainly disorienting coming out of those interviews. Very excited that this movie was born in Nantucket and is completing its life cycle at the drive-in. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, and to be clear, it's not necessarily dying after this screening, but the quick story, because I don't know if everyone knows that, is this movie did start at the Nantucket Film Festival 11 years ago at the film festival, talking to Ben Stiller. He shared a story about taking acid, which has made it into the movie. So we won't tell you about that story, but, Fisher Stevens was also there, and he told a story, and then it started to be like, oh, I bet it'd be really fun to have everybody we can get our hands on or in a room to just share these stories as though we're all just hanging out telling stories. So it did start on Nantucket, and we're thrilled to have it return to the island. Sure. Mike, is there anywhere people can follow along if they want to keep following the Have a Good Trip experience? Yes, they can follow on Twitter and Instagram at Good Trip Netflix, and on Facebook, just look up Have a Good Trip. And we'll post some stuff from the movies and maybe from tonight and maybe some funny memes. Memes. Thanks, Mike. The last thing I got to do is it's time for the last talk show lightning round. What's the last great movie you saw?
Last great movie I saw was an old 1960s Burt Lancaster film called Scorpio. And he's old in the film, and he's essentially John Wick. It's like John Wick in the 60s, Burt Lancaster. It's overly dramatic, and it's incredibly violent, and I just happened upon it, and I need to tell everybody about it.
Last thing that made you laugh?
Oh. I really have been loving Alan Partridge on HBO Max. Like HBO Max, they have everything from Alan Partridge, and there's been some holes in my Alan Partridge viewing. So watching Steve Coogan do this character over such a long period of time, and the evolution of that character is it is unlike anything else. Like, I love Jiminy Glick, I love Borat, I love Ali G, but this character has grown. It arcs. It is. I have never seen anything like it.
You are really let into his psychological pain of that person and feel it so much while you're laughing. It's unbelievable.
The one that I just watched last night was, he was on a book chat show, and he was promoting. So basically, Steve Coogan is promoting the book that he wrote as Alan Partridge, but he's on this book chat show, and it's so clear that Alan Partridge has not read a book, and it does not care about it, and is only here to make money. And it's just watching this celebrity be trying to be so comfortable, but so uncomfortable. It's an hour long interview with this character promoting his book, which is all fictional. It's just so many levels. And look, you love levels on levels on levels. I mean, there you go.
Last thing that made you feel like, oh shit, we might actually survive this after all.
Give me 1 second. I want to say it the right way, because I think I have something good. Fuck. What is it? A worm or a moth that becomes a butterfly? What becomes a butterfly? What cocoons up?
Caterpillar.
That's it, right? So here's what I'll say. The caterpillar thought it was the end of the world before it became a butterfly. And I feel like that we are all right now caterpillars. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, but in an amazing way. I also think there's so many things being spoken to publicly that have never been spoken to. And while that is tremendously uncomfortable, and while that is tremendously unnerving, it is so good for our country. And I believe in doctors, and I believe in science, and I believe that we will get through this part, but we got to be safe. And look, if you're not going to be safe, I don't care. We've laid down enough laws. If you're not going to do it, if you're being safe, I'm on your side. If you're not being safe, take your chances at that point. But yeah, I do think that it's always darkest before the dawn. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm hoping. Please, I don't want it to get any more darker.
Yeah. We got enough. And Paul, I'll give you the last word.
This is my first time in Nantucket, and I got to say, it lives up to all the things I heard. And the only thing I really heard is the limerick. So I guess so that's about it.
All right. Thank you, Paul. And enjoy. Have a good trip, everybody.
Have a good trip.